I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Global Book Network, we're uncovering one of the most devastating and overlooked chapters in American military history. The name of the book? The Soldiers Fell Like Autumn Leaves, and it's written by a terrific author. His name is Schoenfield. This riveting account details the Battle of the Wabash, America's greatest defeat in the Indian Wars, where Native forces crushed U.S. troops in a battle deadlier than Custer's last stand. With powerful insights, rich Native perspectives, and an eye-opening ecological dimension, this book challenges everything you thought you knew about the early American frontier. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him on TV today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Rick, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks, Logan. It's a pleasure to be here.
St. Clair's Defeat, as it's also known as, an amazing episode in American history. 1,000 U.S. soldiers approximately killed, nearly that many wounded and seriously hurt. What drew you to this battle and to focus on it for this book?
When I first read about the battle, it wasn't a long account, and I got curious about how the Native American warriors were able to rout the American army, even though the army outnumbered them almost 2-1. And then as I started to read more, I looked at the books that were out there, which isn't a lot. It's a small fraction compared to, the Custer literature. And I decided I was going to do my own research, going back to original sources. And as I got more and more fascinated, I decided I would try to write the most accurate book on the subject, while writing it with a style that gave readers the drama of what occurred, because there was a lot of drama that occurred in these events. And then I cover the entire war, which is America's first war after independence, and set the context and the times of frontier conflict.
Why do you think this battle is largely forgotten in mainstream history?
I think that, well, of course, at the time, this was the news of the day. And it led to changes in the structure of the American Army. It was America's not only first war after independence, but first undeclared war, setting a precedent, led to the first congressional investigation. So how did all that get forgotten? Probably because it's a combination of it was so early in American history. It was such a terrible defeat. It had far-reaching consequences because it slowed American expansion on what was then the frontier, which meant Ohio, Indiana, for almost 4 years while the war continued. And then, when you get to Custer's last stand and the Indian Wars west of the Mississippi, by that time, there's more reporting. The camera has been invented, and then movies come along and they romanticize things. So I guess it's a combination of factors. But this battle is actually more significant, both in terms of casualties, which were of the 1,800 plus American troops, over 600 killed, over a third killed, and over 900, over half total casualties. And the rest fled when they got the chance.
And to put it into perspective for our audience, this is modern day Ohio. The year, I believe, is about 1791, if I'm not
Exactly.
mistaken. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely correct. It's the morning of November 4th, 1791, and it is in Ohio, extremely close to the Indiana border, and just a short number of miles away from the beginning of the Wabash River. It's at what
And
is now Fort Recovery, Ohio, where there's a museum and historical society.
was it essentially a sneak attack?
Um, in a sense. So what happened was this. The American Army is camped the Army is supplemented by Kentucky militia who are camped a quarter of a mile ahead on the other side of the Wabash River. They didn't know it was the Wabash River, but that's what it was. 1,000 or so Native American warriors have approached. They're hidden. So it isn't so when they attack, it wasn't expected by most of the American army. I'll back to that in a second. Apologize if these answers are too long. But so when the attack comes, the army is awake, the militia is awake, but almost all of them are surprised when hundreds of Shawnee, Miami, and Delaware burst out of the woods and charge at the militia. And they know from past experience, they can expect the militia, the Kentucky militia infantry, when this happens, to panic and run, which is exactly what happened. Two prongs on either side from other tribes sweep around to envelop and surround the hill. Now, when I say almost everyone was surprised, there was an expectation by General St. Clair that the Indians wouldn't fight. Most officers shared that view. However, the night before the attack, a patrol went out, their assignment to stop some Indians from stealing the horses. They found so many Indians and barely weren't ambushed themselves that they came back and the captain reported to the colonel of the militia, we're going to be attacked in the morning. We need to go tell the general. Now, he'd been sent out by the second in command, General Butler. Long story short, Captain Slough reports back to General Butler, explains what happened. Slough says, should I go tell General St. Clair? Slough says, no, you're tired, go to bed. And Butler does nothing. Butler had an entirely dysfunctional relationship with St. Clair. So a few officers had an expectation, and the army was awake, and the army quickly formed the battle line. So it was a sneak surprise attack, in a way.
Yeah, because basically somebody turned a deaf ear to it rather than responding to the information that was at hand.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
amazing. Fascinating part of your book, of course, is that you incorporated firsthand Native American sources. Tell us about finding those and what type of perspective they added to your narrative.
I did, feels like countless Google searches looking for information. Now, some of the sources were I could find by the existing literature. For example, the Journal of John Norton is pretty well known, and he was half English, half Cherokee, visited the Shawnee and the Cherokee in the early 1800s and got some firsthand descriptions from them about what happened. I also was able to find the firsthand account of an adopted Shawnee warrior named George Ash, and that was extremely helpful. Uh, and then by running Google search after Google search and hitting a lot of dead ends, I found some other Native American accounts also that had passed down to the next generation through their oral history. And
Amazing.
that gave perspective. I also found in the records of the British Colonial Office transcripts sometimes, such as a speech by the Shawnee War Chief Blue Jacket, which was really interesting because while he was trying to convince the British for more help, I could recognize that he was using the three classical forms of persuasion.
Mm.
Appealing to emotion, appealing for justice, and appealing for your logical self-interest. So the quality of rhetoric was extremely high.
Wonderful. Adds such a new dimension to the look at these conflicts. I think it's absolutely terrific. Also, a new dimension that's explored in your book are the ecological consequences of the U.S. push westward. Tell us about that.
Yes, I think I'm the first author of any books on this subject that really viewed this as an ecological war, because here's what would happen. When settlers came, the forest came down. The forest, when settlers first arrived, when whites first arrived at Ohio, Ohio was 95% forest. Indiana was 90% forest. We're talking about billions of trees. When settlers came, they cleared the forest not just for what was absolutely necessary for the farm, the house, the barn, They cleared the forest because they saw the forest as an impediment and a danger. The general culture was the forest was good for timber, and that was about it. This goes back to probably Anglo-Saxon culture in England. But in the meantime, of course, the forest is home to the Native Americans. It provides food, it provides material for shelter, it provides fur for the fur trade, which was internationally important and which for decades had been giving them trade goods that they had grown to use to simply improve their quality of life.
Mm.
They knew enough not to hunt animals to extinction, but they hunted the animals for fur as well as for food. So, probably based on a trip I made to Malaysia with the Rainforest Trust, I realized this is a battle for the ecosystem because the forest it did, in fact, come down. And it was talked about uh, some years later by James Madison after he left the presidency. Uh, and he, in the famous speech, talked about how the deforestation, which he basically termed understandable, was a bad thing and was disturbing the balance of nature. And of course, now we have climate change. We need the forest to help mitigate and minimize climate change. We want the Amazon to remain standing for our own essential needs. And here we have more than 200 years ago, an ecological war over the forest.
Well, it's a great new dimension that's explored in your book, like you said, that has been ignored in other narratives on the subject. So I think that's terrific and does put our climate change battle that is raging today in historical perspective as well. What do you hope readers take away from The Soldiers Fell Like Autumn Leaves?
Well, really a number of things, man. I hope they get an appreciation for the people and the times and the intense struggle that happened. I tried to put it in the context of the clashing cultures to have a fair context. Uh, but most people certainly don't know that, there was just a murderous animosity between most Kentuckians and most of the Native Americans at the time. Not all, but most. There were notable exceptions. Uh, I'd also hope that people would take away an appreciation for the ecological importance of what happened, and it goes on to this day. The struggle in the Amazon, for example, for indigenous control of the rainforest. To take away, and I get into this in my last chapter, to take away the importance of planning and critical thinking, which was done effectively by the Native American combination of chiefs and was done in a dismal fashion in this leading up to and in this battle by the American leadership from the president on down through the generals and colonels and majors. And last, if I may, to appreciate that learning from history is really useful. And I say this because 26 years before the battle, a book was written based on the French and Indian Wars. And at the time, it was a well-known book. And it explained how the Native Americans fought the British Army. It explained what you should do to counter that, and that if you didn't, you were going to get destroyed. And it was either forgotten or discarded by the time the Battle of the Wabash occurs because they did exactly the wrong thing, the American Army did. So despite the fact that here's a book which explained it, actually been around for a quarter of a century.
Amazing, amazing. Well, there's a new book adding to the dialogue now that I think will spark readers' interests and perspectives on the conflict between the early settlers and, of course, the Native Americans that were living on the land. The name of the book is The Soldiers Fell Like Autumn Leaves. It is a haunting and powerful account of a battle that changed the course of American and Native history. Rick, thank you so much for joining us here today on
Thanks so much, Logan. I really enjoyed it and appreciate it.
I enjoyed speaking with you as well. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for the Global Book Network. So long for now.